So I'm really curious. A lot of people, they have lots of ideas, and very few of them ever actually get executed, done.
Hmm.
And you seem to do a really good job of taking ideas and actually building. And I'm curious, where do your ideas come from? And then how do you decide this is something I want to do versus this is just an idea that I'm just going to kind of, let exist here and not going to really do anything with it?
I mean, sometimes the ideas come from inspiration, whatever. I think for certain projects, a thought will formulate and it will kind of just like sit on a loop.
Okay.
It's almost like something playing in the background that's kind of muted maybe for a while. And then it's like the moment that I even look in its direction, it kind of starts pinging a little bit more. It's not always like that. There have definitely been projects that have been slowly circulating for years in the background that I just know that I'm not ready for. Like, I just know that
Interesting.
this
Okay.
needs to incubate a little bit more. I think, though, with the stuff that I have created, I had a sense of urgency with a lot of them. And I don't know where the sense of urgency came from. It could have been anxiety. Like, if I don't do this right now, someone else will do it, or it's just going to be lost to the idea ether that floats around. But some of them I just had to make a move on. And then once I started, in my brain, it was like, I can't stop until it's successful. And success can be whatever to anyone, but in my terms, I needed to watch it grow.
Fascinating. Okay. So there's kind of an intuitive or like inner awareness of this is ready to go or this is not that you can kind of just have a sense of.
I mean, some of the bigger projects that are still like ruminating back
Yep.
here, it's not that I'm not ready for them, but maybe it's like financially it's not something I can do. Maybe these other projects that I've already started need to get to a certain point to where I can take a step back before I can refocus my energy. And sometimes it's like I'm just not done with this thing yet, because I definitely don't believe that I'm somebody that will stick with one thing forever. It's fascinating when people say they've been with the same company for 45 years. That's probably not me. I
Yeah.
will probably die having been a vintage seller and a photographer and a something and something and a something.
Right.
It's just how I'm wired, but I'm not quite ready yet to switch
Right.
gears. And so it's like there's something back here and I'm curious about whatever this is, but I'm not quite done with these things yet.
When you have an idea of something and you say, all right, I want to start acting on this, do you feel like you have a full vision of where you're trying to go, or do you feel like you just have enough to take the first couple steps and then it kind of develops as you go?
It kind of develops as I go. I would say the visuals of whatever I'm doing are usually the first thing, just because I am such a visual person. I think with like the photography background, I want to be able to see how it looks. And when I start daydreaming, thinking, planning about whether it's the market, like what it's going to look like, how we're going to bring people in, branding, whatever. I'm very, very visual with it, but but it is also an ongoing process because things happen, and especially if you bring in somebody else, which I have in certain projects, they have opinions and ideas, and I always want to leave space and room for those. So things, I don't ever want to be too rigid. I want things to be malleable because I feel
Right.
like that's, especially when there's other hands in it, like there's got to be this fluidity there so both people can create freely and it can kind of grow from that.
It often seems like, and maybe you have a different experience, when you're starting something, you're kind of the only one holding that creative energy, that vision. And then eventually other people start to get a feel for it and that you kind of start to pull in and draw,
Hmm.
um, you know, uh, input and involvement and stuff from other people. But certainly maybe in that initial step, you're kind of the one kind of holding this thing and keeping this thing going.
Yeah.
Is that something you've experienced or not really?
Not, not necessarily. I am trial by fire. That's how I lived most of my life.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's been unfortunately, but I don't always sit and ruminate and overanalyze, because if I
Yep.
allow myself to do that, I will find every crack. I will find every way that it won't work. And that I just feel like is a recipe for disaster. If for myself personally, like I would rather be extremely delusional in my belief in myself and go for it and fail
Yep.
than never start it because I was too afraid, or like I just sat there and told myself I don't have the time, the energy, the money, the creative brain power. I'm doing it
Yep.
alone, whatever. I can't do that because it will absolutely derail everything that I've built.
No, I 100% feel that. I think delusional is actually on some level like a really reasonable and important part of being creative and putting yourself out there, especially if you have big goals and dreams.
Yep.
You have to do things that other people look at and say, that's not possible. Like, you have to. I love that. You mentioned being willing to have the input of other people in your project, leaving space for that. When it comes to including the creative input of others, how do you balance that with your own vision for where you want to take your brand?
So I will say with Paloma, I don't as much. And it's only because Paloma is like a direct representation of me in a lot of ways.
Right.
When I started, I did have a partner.
Okay.
I didn't start Paloma by myself. I had a partner. We were together for about the first 6 to 8 months, I think. And it was really challenging for me because we had such different ideas on what we wanted things to look like.
Right.
In terms of what we were sourcing and these different things. But it was honestly one of the best lessons for me because she just gave me a different perspective. She kind of showed me that you didn't just have to be one way, you didn't just have to source one thing. But moving forward, because it was just myself, Paloma was kind of this brain baby where I got to create whatever I wanted, and I didn't put limitations on it. If I wanted to source something or style a shoot in one way, I just did it. And so it's always kind of been a little bit of a representation of where I'm at with my own style choices and things like that. I would say more of like the market is where I have a lot of other input because it's not just me. That was created with a co-creator, and everything is decided together.
Okay.
We don't make any decisions singularly at all.
When it comes to evolving Paloma, let's say, the brand, what it is, do you feel pressure to constantly be evolving it intentionally, or do you kind of let it evolve along with yourself? You mentioned it's kind of an extension of you.
I would say I do feel a little bit of both. There is a pressure, not necessarily for it to evolve, but for the offerings that I'm providing or for the way that it's going to evolve. I do feel a pressure to kind of like figure that out. I've kind of been in that process for the last year, and
Okay.
I don't have it figured out. And there are a lot of things that I want to do, but I'm also trying to have this balance of like, Paloma's not my only thing that I have going on. It's
Right.
not where I want to spend all of my time. So how do I act efficiently to implement some of these changes that I want, but also not go back to this crazy schedule where I was working 50, 60 hours a week and wasn't present for my family, friends, and whoever. So there is some pressure, but I am slowly letting it evolve. And there are days where I absolutely lose my mind because it's not moving quick enough. But then I remember like slow and steady is
Yeah.
okay. You know,
Yeah.
it's the whole point, that's sustainable fashion. There's no reason for me to be trying to like move this along at a pace that I'm not comfortable or capable of doing at the time.
That makes a ton of sense, especially like you said, if you're putting energy into 3 or 4 different businesses or projects. The last question, where you are now, looking back to the version of you that hadn't built all the things you have now, are there things you've learned or perspectives you have or advice that you would offer?
I think for me, if I was talking to myself back then, it would just be to continue to create and to not put any limitations on it. One thing that I realized very quickly was that I had what I would consider a pretty high taste level, but I wasn't actually able to execute at that level. It was frustrating because I really wanted to be able to do that. And so something I've learned is that your taste and your ability might not always match up, but if your taste is here, then just keep working and just keep working, and you'll fine tune it along the way. It doesn't have to be perfect, but if you're just creating for you because you have this innate desire to create something or this need to build something, whatever it is, to just keep doing it. And it's not going to be perfect, but it really doesn't need to be, because over
Right.
time you're going to fine tune, you're going to chip away, and then one day you might realize like you have kind of balanced out, and then you just get to keep pushing higher if that's the goal.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of people get stuck in their heads of it's not perfect and there's so many people out there doing it. It doesn't matter. If you're doing it for you and if you're doing it to just put something beautiful into the world, then just do it. You have no idea who it's going to reach, who it's going to touch, who you're going to inspire, who you're going to meet along the way. And I think all of those things are worth a little bit of uncomfortable you know, to be uncomfortable for a second and to kind of face that anxiety. And as time goes on, it gets easier and easier and easier to do it.
That's awesome. I had never considered the gap between kind of your taste level and your ability to execute. That's really interesting.
It's the most frustrating thing in the world.
I can imagine, but also I imagine, like you said, really cool as that gap starts to close, and then you just get to push everything
Yeah.
together.
Yeah.
Awesome.